Welcome back to Voices of Long COVID. I'm your host, Noelle. This season, I've been bringing you strategies and support for living with our condition and discussing current themes around the topic of long COVID. I hope you're finding it useful. When I asked my listeners what topic they would most like to hear on the podcast, it was overwhelmingly that of mental health. And it's no wonder, people are struggling. Living with long COVID is such a complex illness, full of many life changes and layers of emotion. So that's what we're going to be discussing today: how to maintain your mental health while living with chronic illness. To do that, I am so pleased to welcome Dr. Lucy Gahan. She is a clinical psychologist from Shropshire, England, who has been living with long COVID since April 2020. Thank you so much for being here to have this important discussion.
Oh, thank you for inviting me.
Lucy, what is your professional background?
So I'm a clinical psychologist, and I now work in an NHS long COVID service in Shropshire. So I've always been really interested in body and mind, and I've kind of flipped between the two all the way through my career. I was going to be a physiotherapist, and I was a physio assistant for some time, and then I ended up just getting distracted and ended up being a psychologist. And I worked in mental health after I qualified for a few years, and then I got really drawn to physical health psychology, working in a palliative care team until long COVID hit. And then, well, we all know that all changed. And here I am working as a clinical psychologist in a long COVID service.
And what is your personal connection to long COVID?
How long have we got? So as I say, I was working in a physical health service in palliative care, and that was, March 2020. And then I got COVID in April 2020. And it was, as we all know, like massively life-changing. So I had a pretty nasty disease, couple of weeks with COVID. It wasn't exactly mild, but I wasn't in hospital. It was such a horrible experience of those 2 weeks. It felt like, I think we all know this now, but it felt like my body had been taken over by some kind of alien force. It felt like an illness, like I'd never experienced anything like it before. And it also felt really, really odd illness in lots of ways, where it would, even in the acute phase of the couple of weeks, I'd have like breathing difficulties, and then suddenly it was like it disappeared, and I thought, oh, it's gone. I'm sure lots of people can identify with this. So had that a couple of weeks, and then like lots of people, I thought I was getting better. I started to go for walks again, as I'd been doing before. And then suddenly one day I was standing in the kitchen. This is about 3 weeks or so after the acute infection. I was standing in the kitchen, and I just felt like if I didn't sit down, I was going to fall down. And that was just the beginning of this horrible cascade of symptoms that all seemed to go downhill from there. Yeah, I'd never felt so ill in my life, and pretty much unable to function really very much at all for weeks to months. And when I think about how, like, looking back now, I think about how ill was I really that ill. And I remember my partner trying to take me to the GP because my heart rate just wouldn't go down. And I remember getting myself to the bottom of the stairs so that I could go open the front door, get across the lawn into the car. And I remember just thinking, it was about 10 feet from the bottom of the stairs to the car. And I just remember thinking, how am I going to get from where I am into the car? And that's, for me, it's sort of one of those moments just reminds me how ill I was, I suppose. So yeah, this is quite a long answer, isn't it? So,
That's okay. It's hard to summarize, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
So that was my personal connection to long COVID. It's intense, like so many people.
Yeah, that alien feeling that you mentioned is exactly how I worded it back in the beginning. And just,
Really? Yeah.
I knew it was a different illness that I'd never had before, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Tell us a bit about your book, Breaking Free from Long COVID, which I highly recommend. It's very well done. And tell us why you wrote it.
Okay, yeah, it's a really interesting question because I think at that time that I'm talking about, sort of May 2020, people weren't really, there was just a corner of the internet that I'd found in the Facebook groups that people were talking about these horrible effects. And I'm sure lots of people listening to this will remember this, but people were saying like 10 weeks, maybe it gets better at 10 weeks, and then it was 14 weeks, and then it was 18 weeks. And then I'd found Noah Greenspan, and I started to find some things that were helping. And most of that stuff was around the nervous system and taking some actions to like calm the nervous system. So that changed things a little bit for me. And I was, even though I wasn't able to get back to work, I was a bit more functional within the house, let's say. And at the same time, I realized that I was drawing on some of the things that I would talk with people about in my work when I was working in physical health services. Some of these ideas in narrative therapy literature were really helping me just to make some sense of all this and try and find my way through it somehow. So I think I didn't like make a decision to write a book. I think I was just creating my own survival guide, really. And at the same time, I just really wanted to share some of these ideas that weren't really around in, well, you don't really hear in sort of general psychology literature. So I almost felt like compelled to get these things down on paper, and I never really thought it would be a book. But I started to just write little bits, and then suddenly chapters seemed to just be forming, and I thought, well, I just sent it to a publisher, and to my amazement, they wanted to publish it. So, but I think it was pretty therapeutic just writing it, and thinking perhaps that maybe out of all this, perhaps there's something that may resonate with somebody else. And I suppose something else happens, like when something like this happens in your life. It was almost like, I'm sure we might get to this, I suppose, later on, but it's almost like a sense of, well, I can do anything now. It was like life became something that I could maybe just mess about with because I nearly almost didn't have it. That was that feeling. So why not write it into a book? It wasn't something that I'd ever intended to do, but I just thought, well, why not? And it just kind of evolved from there.
Well, yeah, I mean, if we can get through this, we can get through anything, right?
Yeah,
And
exactly. Yeah,
everything seems pretty small potatoes in comparison,
it
right?
does. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And I really love that you took your own struggle and are trying to help people with that. So that's fantastic.
Thank you.
What makes the mental health challenges of long COVID different from that of other chronic illnesses?
Yeah, I mean, certainly, like I was referring to before, there is obviously a lot of overlap with other illnesses, particularly chronic illnesses. But I do think that there are some very unique challenges around long COVID. So I suppose the obvious one being that if you have long COVID, you're having to live in within the society with COVID still around, the very thing that's caused this to happen to you. And I think that's pretty unique, isn't it? So that's one of the things that make it unique, I think. But also, some of the narrative literature has been really helpful for me here, because the idea that every illness has a storyline and a plot. So if you have an illness that has a more coherent plot, so there's a well-trodden path within that illness. So you have a diagnostic criteria, you have particular treatment. That's a slightly different experience, a very different experience if you have an illness that doesn't have that coherent plot. So quite often I think of long COVID as sort of playing tricks on you. There's so many layers of challenges in different contexts. So like within your body, the psychological challenges, the effects on your relationships, the effects on your ability to work, finance. So there's like layer upon layer of challenge, isn't there? Mm-hmm. So coming back to the plot, if you've got an illness that doesn't have this coherent plot and storyline, it doesn't have any particular cultural resonance. So people don't know how to talk to you about it. It's really hard to engage in conversation about it because it doesn't necessarily resonate with people and it doesn't make sense. So not only are you cut off from like practical support, like it's hard to get benefits, it's hard to get medical help a lot of the time, but you're also cut off from potential sources of support because people don't know how to engage with you about it. And sometimes it can be hard to even find the language for yourself, can't it? So if you can't put your experience into words, that's really potentially really isolating. And then, of course, you've got all the other things about long COVID, the unpredictability, the ups and downs, the whole effect on your identity and who you are to yourself and other people. So I think there's just like so many different layers of why it's so challenging on so many levels.
Yeah, absolutely. And talking about the plot, it's not a predictable plot. It's not
No.
finite. It's not linear, the recovery.
Yeah.
And like you say, people don't know how to react, they don't bring you the lasagnas and they don't have the meal trains and they don't bring you flowers because it's all pretty much invisible to them. And it's definitely challenging. And it feels like, the rug has been ripped out from underneath you because
Yeah.
one day you're living your life, you're working, you're socializing, and then the next everything has changed and your identity, your roles, your future is all up in the air.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's definitely unique.
And also just going back to the plot, a psychologist called Kate Weingarten, it's spelled Kaethe. A lot of what I've written about and what helps me is based on her work, and I definitely recommend her work to people to look her up, because she talks about progressive and regressive storylines. So a progressive storyline is when you get a cold, you're ill for a week, 10 days, and then you usually get better, and that's a progressive storyline. People know how to engage with that. You can have conversations about it. If you have an illness that's not getting better, that people say, "Oh, how are you doing?" and you're still not getting better. It's not something that people want to engage with. And that leads to the isolation, I think. And I think those ideas around the storyline is really important when you've got an illness like long COVID.
Yeah, and I hope you get better soon.
Yeah, yeah, all of that. Yeah,
It almost puts pressure on you, right? It feels like,
yeah,
oh, there's something wrong with me because I'm not better yet,
yeah,
and it's hard for people to wrap their heads around it. It's hard for me to wrap my own head around it, but
yeah. And
I'm
that has an
most likely,
impact, doesn't it? Because
yeah,
then you maybe stop talking about it because you don't know what to say, and you don't want the
Exactly.
whole conversation to be dominated by your illness. So then you start to maybe be a bit silent about it, and then that leads to like isolation and real loneliness, I think.
Yeah, and it makes you feel like you can't safely talk about it or that you shouldn't talk about it. And
Mm.
that's a whole nother level of complexity.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
What is the psychological toll of not being believed or understood by the medical system, your family, your friends, and society at large?
I think it's huge, isn't it? I mean, it's like we're saying, the isolation and the loneliness, and it makes me think of Susan Sontag. I don't know if you're familiar with her A Kingdom of the Ill and the Kingdom of the Well. And when you step into the kingdom of the ill, and perhaps before if you're living in the kingdom of the well, it's really hard to kind of experience that. And especially when the kingdom of the ill, when you've got something like long COVID, like we've talked about, it's not culturally resonant, then it's almost like stepping into an alternate reality, I think.
Definitely.
Yeah. So it's really hard, I think, for people to just get it, and I think really painful to maybe not even be understood by the closest people to you when even they can't get it. And I think that's huge, isn't it? And it has massive implications on relationships. And I know lots of people's relationships don't survive this because of these effects. And then of course you've got the layer of needing to try and get help from professionals. So you're reliant on the very systems which aren't providing the support, and having to fight your corner at a time when you like most need to conserve your energy, and you, like you say, you would want to be getting the flowers and the the support, but you're having to fight your corner. And then there's also the stigma. um, some people just don't want to talk about COVID, do they? Or long COVID, it's just not what people just don't want to go there. And I remember somebody pointing out that like the very thing that with an energy limiting condition like long COVID or ME, the very thing that we need to do to help ourselves, as in like resting, pacing, it can look like we're just not trying hard enough. And that kind of adds to the stigma, I think. So yeah, that it's, I think the biggest psychological toll is that the many ways that it can cut you off from support and be really isolating.
Yeah, and it's ironic because if you are resting, you are fighting the hardest. It's
Yeah.
not an easy thing to do, and I I see a lot of people out there still pushing, still, trying to keep up with what society expects from them, and
Yeah.
resting is actually much more difficult.
Yeah, it's I mean it's the most difficult thing to do, to want to do things and have to limit yourself and pull yourself back, isn't it? And from the outside it can look like you're not doing anything, you know.
Yeah.
But like you say, that the resting is the action, isn't it? It's the thing that's managing this illness. I talk to lots of people in my work where relatives are saying, well, you need to try harder, because they don't see that the resting is the trying.
Yeah.
And that feels like one of the tricks of long COVID to me. It's a real dirty trick, isn't it?
It is. We need your help to spread the word about long COVID. Please share this podcast with somebody new and continue to share your stories with the people around you. That leads right into something that so many people with long COVID struggle with, and that's grief. not just one grief, but loss after loss, your career, your hobbies, your friendships, even your basic independence. How do we process the grief of losing our former lives?
Yeah, it's huge, isn't it? We could talk about this for hours, I imagine. But
Yeah.
um and lots of people have, I've seen lots of people talking about this. And I suppose thinking about grief as we know, it's not a linear journey. It can come in cycles, or it can just like smack you across the face, can't it, out of the blue. Um, when you think that you've got somewhere, and then for me, some like seeing somebody running, for example, it's for a while I could barely look. I had to look away if I saw somebody running, because that grief is, it just comes from nowhere. Well, it feels like it comes from nowhere.
Absolutely.
And there's a risk of trying to trying to rush through it and try and smooth over how like devastating this is and to people's lives, and how frightening it can be. A lot of the conversations I have with people are about how frightening it is in so many ways, and the sort of symptoms that are just terrifying, aren't they? And I think acknowledging to yourself that why, and making sense of why it's so hard, is really important. And a couple of the terms in the narrative therapy literature have really helped me kind of pin that down. And I've written a little bit about that in the book, about self-loss and chronic sorrow. And those two terms, so like chronic sorrow being, this is a reasonable reaction to the loss of so many things. It's not pathological, it's reasonable. And somebody called Alstrom talked about self-loss and different types of losses. So he talked about loss of bodily functions, loss of relationships, loss of an autonomous life, roles, activities, identity, loss of uplifting emotions. And then the one that really gets me is like the loss of life imagined. And that's these are massive losses, aren't they?
Mm-hmm.
And I think just using those as a lens to look through at the grief and make sense of it. This is why it's so difficult, because these are huge losses. And I think perhaps grief isn't incompatible with having value in life. So you can still be grieving and you can still find value in life. And I think that kind of both and two things can be true position has kind of helped me, I think. So both of those things can be true. And I don't know if you've come across the writer Josie George.
No.
She wrote a book called A Still Life. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
No.
She's she's had lots of different well, I don't know, lots of unnamed conditions. She's for a long time, and since she was a child. And she writes so beautifully about her life that's other, so from an outside position it might look like she's got a small life and it's very limited, and she writes so beautifully about the richness that she finds in life. And I think that kind of both and position, like I can be grieving but I can find value in life, and finding value in some joy in things doesn't mean that I'm okay with the losses. It feels really important to me.
Yeah, and I think it's difficult because this grief is ongoing, right?
Yeah,
It's it's hard to process because it's so many layers, it's ongoing, it's never ending it seems, but it's important to validate those feelings of grief because if we just push it aside, I think it's going to catch up with us in the end. It's going to snowball. Yeah, I think it's
yeah,
important to validate those feelings.
yeah. And I suppose remember that it takes time to like reassemble yourself when something so huge happens to you. It's not something that can be rushed through with 6 sessions of therapy, for example.
Yeah.
And I think there's like pressures, like in the NHS, you've got 6 sessions of talking therapies, and this is like massive, isn't it? This is huge, and you need to take that time to. It takes, I don't know how far in you are, Noel, but like it's 5 years for me, and I know,
Mm-hmm.
I think
five
are you
years.
similar? Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's probably from this position you can see that it's not something that just happens, that can be rushed. It's like it's a whole, you can feel like you're a different person, can't you? And um yeah, it's a process. But I think something that's felt really important to me is finding anything that makes me feel like me, and that can be really hard to find. And perhaps that's why I started writing, because that was one way that I could do something, make something of this. But in other small ways, so like I was an exerciser, like lots of people with long COVID can't exercise anymore. But what I can do is um, low to the ground, short bursts of yoga. No, yoga's a real cliche, isn't it? But that makes me feel a bit like my old me that could go for a run. It's not perfect. It's not what I want to do, but it does tap into that part of me that feels like I can do something and make a difference to how I feel. And I totally acknowledge that that's, if you're at the position where you can hardly get out of bed, that's really, really difficult.
Let's talk about loneliness. So many people say they've lost friends or that people disappear once the illness doesn't resolve quickly. Why do friendships fade during chronic illness?
I think there's so many reasons, aren't there? I mean, we've touched on some of them, but I think just the ability of others to get it, I think, first of all. And it's a really hard thing to understand. And if you haven't got it, I think, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I would understand it if I didn't have it. So you've got that layer, and then your capacity to engage changes, your availability. I think the ability of other people to tolerate this over a long period of time is hugely challenging on relationships, isn't it? And like we touched on before, if you can't really voice or put into language or feel safe even talking about how you really are, that can then create this emotional distance, and then leads to you feeling unseen. And I think that's really challenging on relationships, and also around like differences in precaution levels around COVID. Maybe it can feel like you're just inhabiting different worlds, I think.
Definitely.
And I feel like I've lucky enough to have a small number of close friends who don't know if they necessarily get it, but are willing to try, you know. And but I think walking this walk with people who have long COVID is so important in whatever way, because of the challenges that it puts on your relationships with, if people don't have long COVID and can't quite get it. I think it's so important to also connect with other people who are going through it.
Yeah, I think just having those friends that are at least willing to sit with you and willing to try to understand is half the battle.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
if you have a few people like that, that's pretty amazing.
Yes, yeah,
I think being able to hold space for each other is, you know, the most important part of friendship. So
yeah.
having those empathetic friends and people that are in it for the long haul, right? Because
Yeah.
I've, you know, there have been people who have walked out of my life as soon as the word COVID
Mm.
was in the conversation. And then there's people that stuck around for a while. And then there's people that you can tell it's like, oh, you're still sick.
Yeah, you're still talking about COVID.
Still
Yeah.
sick. And yeah, they seem to put this expiration date on your illness, which is unfortunate.
Yeah.
So, given all of the friendship and relationship challenges, how can we stay connected when our world has shrunk so much?
Yeah, I think like I was saying before, I think we know the massive importance of having a community and having accompaniment through all this. And I think that that doesn't necessarily have to be, I don't think so. It doesn't have to be active necessarily. So with sort of like the online Facebook groups, for me, I'm not great at participating in online groups, but I think just witnessing that there is this community that they're out there. You're not walking this alone. Listening to your podcast, listening to other people's um, podcasts, and just yeah, finding that virtual community is so important, isn't it? And um, I'm lucky enough to have a friend who does have long COVID, and we tend to just occasionally we just voice note each other, and then we don't hear from each other for weeks and weeks, and then but I kind of know that she's out there, and I think that's so important, isn't it? And
It is.
yeah, but in terms of relationships with other people and with friends who maybe don't have long COVID, I think for a long time, and I still have the urge to try and like educate and trying to explain what it's all about. But I think gradually I've become more selective about who I tell the whole story to, because it's sort of feels quite risky if you're not sure what sort of response you're going to get. It feels quite risky to put yourself out there, and I think I've gradually realized that I'm very careful. I select really carefully that who I tell what to, and realize that you can still be true to your own experiences without having to tell everything. You don't need to tell everything, and just to be really selective. And I think I realized pretty quickly in 2020 that only I know how I feel in my body and what my needs are. So I try and meet those needs as much as I can, so that I don't need everyone to get it. I don't need everyone to accommodate me, because I'm already accommodating myself, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that I think maybe that puts a bit less pressure on relationships, because I'm not needing everything from one friend, or I get that sense of community just from reading social media sometimes with people with long COVID.
Yeah, I definitely feel like things have evolved in that sense for me as well. And
Mm.
it's exhausting to always be telling your story. I,
That is, isn't
I
it?
feel like
Yeah.
saying, just listen to the podcast at this point.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's important to find your people, even if they're virtual, like you said.
Yeah.
And you need a certain amount of people that get it, and they're not going to flinch when you say, I couldn't get out of bed today, and
Yeah.
I couldn't feel my hands and feet today, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
They're just going to get it. And yeah, it's try and have kind of a well-rounded group of people you can talk to, people that you can talk about your illness with, and people that you don't have to talk to about your illness. I think that's important too.
Yeah. Yeah. Or you can just give the bits without feeling like you're hiding anything or betraying yourself by not telling it
Mm-hmm.
all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do we go about feeling all of these very strong emotions that come with this illness without becoming overwhelmed? And what practices do you recommend to help with this?
I think a bit like I was saying about grief, just acknowledging acknowledging it to yourself and having accompaniment or safe place to share. And that might not be one place, like we were just saying. I think for me, what helps a lot is having it's a bit of a cliche, but like a toolkit of options, so that when
Mm-hmm.
I'm really struggling, I think, what do I know? What's helped me before here? So if you have that list or that toolkit, when you're in that moment of overwhelm, you don't have to think about it. You don't have to think your way out of it. You just take some action. And I think being able to take some kind of action has been so important in my own experience. It could be like the breathing exercises, like breath pod on Instagram, I find really helpful. It might be taking my electrolytes, it might be the cold water stuff. And the other thing that I've learned is that like tiny bits of actions can have big outcomes. So doing something for like 5 minutes a day can have a massive cumulative effect. And so taking action doesn't have to be a huge thing. It might be something really small. It might be knowing that if you lengthen your out breath, that will calm your nervous system and tune, tip you into parasympathetic. And having those kind of knowledges, I think, are just absolutely vital when you're feeling like overwhelmed. Yeah. How about you? Have you got sort of things that you go to?
Yeah. And like you say, I think it's important to have a list so that when you're struggling, you're not scrambling. You
Yes,
know, what do I do
absolutely.
now? Or you feel despair. You're like, oh, there's nothing I can do to feel better at this moment. And
Yeah.
having a list and things that you've tried, that work for you is important. And I've probably spoken about meditation in just about every episode, but it helps me so much. And
Mm.
anyone can do it. There's no such thing as perfecting meditation. And
Yeah.
yeah, I recommend everyone try that. Journaling. I find journaling really helpful because it gets you out of your own head, it gets it on the paper,
Yeah.
and that really helps me when I've got a thought that's just ruminating, getting it out of my head and on paper. Um, and also, like you said, just doing something small, like thinking to yourself, what can I do that will make myself feel 10% better?
Yeah.
Especially when we don't want to overexert ourselves and exert too much energy, just doing something small will really help. It doesn't have to be a huge thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes I just don't think that you can think your way out of feeling overwhelmed. So before long COVID, as a psychologist, I probably, if someone came to me talking about overwhelm or anxiety, or I would have gone in straight into the head, if that makes sense, thinking different thoughts, that kind of CBT approach, maybe. And now living with long COVID, I've much preferred to go in through the body and the nervous system, and then that affects your psychology. What I find most useful is working on the nervous system rather than going straight to like challenging my thoughts or trying to think my way out of it. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I've been learning a lot about that as well, as opposed to the top-down approach, which is the typical approach.
Yeah.
We're learning every day more and more about somatic approaches, and looking at the body and going bottom up.
Yes.
And yeah, I think you can definitely do both and meet halfway.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
Another thing that I like to use is the grounding technique, the 5 4 3 2 1.
Mm.
So if you're having, an emotional spiral of some kind, it really helps to anchor you. So you think of 5 things you can see in the room, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. And I mix up the numbers all the time. The numbers are not that
Yeah.
important. It's just that you're getting out of your head and, focusing on what's around you. And I find that really effective as well. Also the body scan. So scanning your body from head to toe and what do you feel in each of those body parts? Pay attention. And what do you feel that's good in your body as well?
Mm. Yeah, those could be really helpful, can't they?
Mm-hmm.
And with like the meditation, I really like the meditation, although I do find it quite difficult, and I find the sort of moving meditation most helpful for me. So what I mean by that is I love Yoga with Adrienne. Lots of people have
Yeah.
heard of Yoga with
Yeah. Yeah.
Adrienne, but I think she's fantastic. But specifically, it's about someone like guiding me through something without me having to think about it.
Yes.
So just the moving, the action of just listening to her and doing what she's saying just takes me back into my body rather than it's a bit like having a snow globe that is all shaken up and then roll your mat out, follow the instructions, and the snow settles. I sometimes struggle with just being overwhelmed by thoughts in a still meditation. So I think that can be quite helpful sometimes.
Mm-hmm. I definitely prefer the guided meditations. I use an app called Balance.
Oh, yeah.
Is that what it's called?
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
pretty
I
sure
think
that's what it's
yeah.
called. Um, and you can choose the voice and you can choose the length of time and you can choose the topic. And yeah, if I attempt to just sit there for 15 minutes, okay, 15 minutes, don't think about anything. That doesn't go well, but
Yeah,
but
yeah.
having the guided meditation I find really helpful. And I heard the other day that there's monks that say they've been meditating for decades and they still struggle. They're not perfecting it. They still have thoughts that come in while they're meditating, right? So
Yeah.
it's
Because the
any
meditation is in the bringing it back, isn't it? Not the trying not
yeah,
to think.
and it's a practice, just like yoga. It's a practice. It's not um, a destination, right?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Let's switch to talking about purpose for a minute. How do we rebuild purpose in our lives when they've been so drastically changed?
Yeah, and this is another huge topic, isn't it? And I think purpose can change or does change over your lifetime. I suppose it fits with like values. And I always remember a colleague of mine saying, like, you don't really sit and think about what your values are generally, do you?
Mm-hmm.
And then perhaps when something like this happens that completely dismantles your life, that's when you start to think about what your purpose is and what really matters to you. And I think this is just such a really difficult thing because for me, I've been lucky enough to be able to somehow continue something of my purpose because I have a sedentary job. It still has a physical toll on me, but I manage my own diary and on the whole, and I'm able to do something of that. But if your purpose has been something very physical, then that's really difficult, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
But I can't remember who said this, so apologies. But somebody said, shrink the scale, not the significance. So when you identify what what does really matter to you now, what can you do in line with that? That might be it might be tiny, like what's still possible now. And perhaps at this point in time, it isn't possible. And I don't think for me it would have been possible maybe in the first year of long COVID or more. But then gradually, perhaps realizing that even tiny actions can cause ripples, and you don't know the ripples that your actions have. So, for example, I'm probably the most inactive activist because I try and take some action. So, for example, trying to get clean air in my children's school, I try and engage with the head teacher, and then I'd get nowhere, or I'd get a little bit further, and then 6 months goes by and I don't manage anything. But each time I do something small, I think it feels like it's in line with some of my own purpose about getting the word out there, about being visible, about trying to change something bigger. Perhaps your purpose at the moment might just be in some of those practices that we're talking about. So putting your effort into the healing practices so that you can fulfill purposes in the future.
I think it's important to really sit and think about what are your values in life? What do you feel your purpose is? And like you say, it's not about the scale. What was that saying?
Shrink the scale, not the significance, but I can't credit who it was because I can't remember.
Yeah.
So,
But yeah, you can do that on a smaller scale. And I think that's really important because that ties into those positive experiences that you still want to have, you still want to experience, and you still
yeah,
want to feel like you are living within your values, right? You're in
yes,
alignment with your values.
yeah. And those things might be tiny, mightn't they? Like reposting something that raises awareness, for example,
Sure,
is
yeah.
a tiny thing, but it can cause all sorts of ripples. I don't want to sort of gloss over how devastating it is when you know, if you're using all your energy for having a shower and that's about all you can do or less, then I don't want to kind of gloss over that either, and just
No.
want to acknowledge that when we're talking about purpose, and it's back to that both and thing, isn't it? It's what's still possible. What are your purposes and what's still possible? So like as a mum, that's a I know that's a topic that you've covered already, but just thinking about what I can't. You can get very caught up in what you can't do with your children, can't you? And
Yeah.
but what I can do is I can sit on the sofa with them and watch a film, and they really want me to do that. They really value me sitting with them and watching with them. That's purpose. That feels like I'm not playing football with them, but I'm still doing something that matters, I suppose.
Yeah, and your value is in being a good parent, and
Yeah.
that might look different, but you're still spending that quality time with them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, just on a smaller scale.
Yeah.
Leading right into talking about self worth and success, how do we redefine those when we can't do as much?
Yeah. Um, I've got a book on my bookshelf that I have like staring at me all the time, which is called Rest is Resistance. and
Ah,
and I don't know if you've read it, but
no.
um it's having to so drastically change what I'm capable of. I didn't I didn't even really, it wasn't even visible to me before that I am just a cog in this machine of productivity and capitalism in life. And I think having all this challenged makes it all so visible, doesn't it? This kind of productivity um, and for me, it really just becoming aware of that, more aware of it, and it becoming visible. It kind of led to me really thinking about, well, I don't want to be. Do I really want to be this kind of cog in this machine and just produce and be productive? And almost like that, I always think that anger, getting angry, it kind of points to what matters to you. It's about passion, isn't it? And I think it highlighted for me that I don't really want to live my life with my head down, just trying to get through days of work and not really looking around. And it takes me back to like Josie George's book, A Still Life. I remember she talks about years of watching her neighbours rushing around and going to work and then coming back to work and then doing the same the next day, and thinking that she's missing out. And then one day she just wonders, like, maybe they're missing out. You know?
Yeah.
And I really
I had
like
that
that.
revelation myself. Yeah.
Did you? Yeah.
Yeah. I think one of the first things that I used to ask people and that people would ask of each other is, what do you do for work?
Yeah.
And you know, really having to redefine that self-worth, that it's, you're a human being, not a human doing.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
about being present and, you know, being here, and
Yes.
redefining success. You know, did I rest today when I needed to?
Yeah.
That counts as a successful day for me now.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And rest being potentially productive, isn't it? That it's it's an investment. You could see it as an investment in yourself and your health and your future if you're taking that rest. Um, and it's just, rest now for us is really necessary, but it's probably necessary for everybody. You just didn't realize it before. So um, yeah,
Yeah. I mean, if I am a good girl and I do all
yeah,
my resting, um, my symptoms are much less than if I push it. And if I'm sitting for too long, you know, then the neuropathy cranks up in volume, the tinnitus cranks up, the
mm.
mental fatigue. I can't function. So for me, rest really is productive. Like,
Yeah, and
yeah.
yeah, definitely. And again, I don't want to gloss over, like, we talk about not wanting to be like this cog in this machine of productivity, but life just requires that of you a lot of the time, doesn't it? And that, I can't say that to my children who are hungry, that I don't want to be a cog in the machine of productivity, because it just wouldn't go down well. um, but so real life does require that action, doesn't it? And that's really hard. But I suppose it then takes me back to the 5 minute thing. 5 minutes of something actually can make quite a big difference. And 5 minutes over days and weeks and months, things get done in that way sometimes. Um, so yeah, just kind of balancing both sides of it, I suppose. That's what all I'm saying.
Yeah, having balance, which in my previous life I thought was, you know, getting less sleep so that I could fit everything in, right?
Yeah.
I just saw yesterday, there's a mountain in Vancouver, and there's a hiking trail called the Grind,
Hmm.
which is straight up. I don't know how many meters. It's insane. I've done it a couple times, but there's a competition going on where they're going to do that 20 times in a row, and I'm just,
Wow.
it's just mind-boggling to me now that, you know, but that's what we value, is people pushing themselves, you
Yeah.
know, to the point in some marathons, to the point of collapse,
Yeah.
and that is celebrated, and rest is seen as lazy. And having this illness has really caused me to switch my thinking on that for sure.
Yeah. Definitely. And like, I mean, David Petrino says pacing is sacrifice, and you can't get away from that, can you? It really is sacrifice, and it's I think, again, acknowledging that it is a sacrifice, and potentially it's an investment as well.
Mm-hmm. It's both, definitely.
Yeah.
People often feel like accepting their illness means giving up. Can we accept our reality and hope for improvement? And what does acceptance actually mean to you?
Oh, I whenever this word comes up, I always have a bit of a reaction to it. So, and I think what that's about that I'm realizing is that I think this word acceptance, it often comes from like an outside source. So I quite often hear it in like circles of health professionals, like it's almost a pressure from others from the outside to accept. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
Is this person, are they accepting? Maybe they just need to accept a bit more. And or it can be used as a bit of a stick to beat yourself up with if you're not feeling like you're accepting this. And at times I've thought, well, I absolutely don't accept this. Like, no, like, I really don't. And I did actually voice that in a meeting once. So, because somebody was saying, people with long COVID, need to just accept it a bit more. And I just said, well, I absolutely don't accept it. So, make myself unpopular. So I feel like it can be a bit of a pressure, and it can feel a bit too global, a bit like grief. There's not an end point, is there?
No.
I don't imagine there's an end point where you get to the state of acceptance. So I suppose for me, I almost don't really enter into too much of a relationship with it, and perhaps I suppose you have to have some bit of acceptance, as in, like, for me it's, do I accept it today? I have to. I don't have much choice, because if I'm railing against it, then that takes too much energy. So
Mm-hmm.
so perhaps, I am accepting it more on some level than maybe I was 3 years ago or something. But yeah, I think acceptance perhaps for me is more like in the day, living. I think, like in my book, I talk about living alongside it. I kind of accept begrudgingly, very begrudgingly, that it's there, and I don't want to put all my energy into railing against it. Um, but I also don't enter into too much of, like, do I accept it on a sort of global level, because I think I'd rather put my energy into something else. But I do, yeah, I think it's like it's a process, isn't it? It's not linear. Like we were talking about grief. It's sometimes you can feel like you're living a bit more alongside it, and then sometimes something comes up and you feel like you're back to square one, don't you? And yeah,
Yeah, I feel like acceptance is very personal, and
yeah,
it's something that you can't judge other people for, and
no,
it fluctuates. And
yes, definitely,
for me, I have to have a little bit of it. Otherwise, I would just be striving too much,
yes,
and I would
yeah,
push myself too far. So, yeah,
yes,
like you say, I accept this is my reality today. And acceptance for me is not the same as giving up, because I
mm,
absolutely don't give up, and I absolutely don't accept what's going on in the world.
yeah,
um, but to get through my day, I have to accept that I have long COVID. I have a chronic illness, several chronic illnesses. Um, and I can't just put my running shoes on and go out for a walk or a run.
yeah, yeah.
So for me, there has to be a certain degree of acceptance. But yeah, it's a very tricky.
So perhaps it's asking, what does that mean to you? What does that look like?
Yeah.
What does that look like today?
What does it, and it looks different every day.
Yeah, yeah,
Some days I absolutely do not accept. And that means I'm having a bad day.
Yes. Yeah.
Some days I can put it, the illness on the shelf
Yeah.
and, try and have a little bit of an enjoyable day if my symptoms are less.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, the reality always hits you in the face at some point.
Yeah, and you can't get away from the your acceptance is very tied up with how symptomatic you are, isn't it? And
Yes,
it's
it
much easier
is.
to accept and if you can still do things that matter to you. But I think
Absolutely.
like hope, like I think the hope bit, I am interested particularly in like hope. And I don't know if you've seen on if you follow me on Instagram, I wrote about reasonable hope, because this is one of Kata Weingarten's what she writes about, and she she contrasts reasonable hope with what she calls reasonable hope or rainbow hope. So, like rainbow hope is like these sort of traditional images of hope. It's some time in the future that you look forward to and hope for. Whereas reasonable hope is an action or a series of actions. It's something that we do in daily practice to invest in the future. And I really like that idea of reasonable hope being an action. And I think what that means in practice is that I think when I'm doing my nervous system practices or my breathing, I'm doing hope because I hope that by doing those, they're like an investment into my future that I hope to have.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. And also she talks about reasonable hope being linked to uncertainty. So as long as there's uncertainty in your future, then there's hope. Oh yeah, here she says. So this is Katie Weingarten. She talks about uncertainty. Um, our moment-to-moment lives are always uncertain. We are just better or worse at constructing the illusion of control. And I kind of like that because it's almost like life was always uncertain, but when something like this happens, it's you feel like everything's much more out of control, but it always was. We just couldn't see it.
Yeah. It's also having a chronic illness is also a lesson in letting go of control, which
Yeah,
is difficult for all of us, I think. And
yeah,
I like that saying the only thing constant is change, right?
yeah, yeah,
There's no guarantee. Everything changes, and trying to control that and trying to control your symptoms is an effort in futility, right? We can't control it.
yeah. And ironically, or conversely, the when you start to do those nervous system practices, it almost affects the symptoms in a positive way, and that kind of yeah, has that effect. Time yourself in knots. No.
Definitely. How do we talk to family and friends who don't understand? And how can boundaries help protect our mental health?
That wanting to just make people understand and realizing that some people just aren't going to or aren't willing to try even, and that's really hurtful, isn't it, at times? But
Mm,
just realizing that, and it's made me really careful about choosing my audience. I think that's really important, who you talk to and choosing your audience carefully. If you're aware of your own needs and your own boundaries, if you figure those out yourself, then rather than over explaining them, I think stating your needs, you can often be quite surprised that people respond quite positively and just say, okay, And that for me, it just comes back to that thing that I said before about only I know what I need to do. Not even the closest person to me in my life is inside my body and knows what I need to do now. So I think knowing my own boundaries helps me to to make those decisions about who I talk to and what I say.
I think knowing your limits and, having a discussion with yourself, what are my boundaries? How do I protect my mental health? How do I protect my physical health
Yeah,
when interacting with family and friends? And, really trying to stick to those boundaries, which is easier said than done, but
it is.
I really love the book by Tony Bernard. It's called How to Be Sick. Have you read that one?
Yeah, I have. Yeah, a long time ago, but yeah, that's
Yeah,
a really good book. Yeah.
it really helped me with framing my thoughts around chronic illness. It's a very emotional read. I highly recommend that one.
Hmm.
In addition to your book, do you have any book recommendations? You've mentioned a few already.
Oh gosh. I might have to add this on, but yeah, definitely Josie George, A Still Life. James Nestor, Breath. Is it Breath? Um, The Oxygen Advantage really helped me. Um, yeah, those are the ones that spring to mind.
Where can people find you if they want to get in touch or to learn more?
On Instagram, mainly long COVID psychologist. I'm a bit hit and miss with social media, but yeah, I am on Instagram, and that's probably the main place to find me.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your time and energy with me today. Such great insight and tips for people. Thank you.
Oh, no, thank you for having me. And it's really great to talk about these things. And I think your podcast is like so valuable to have these voices. Like the fact it's called Voices of Long COVID, I think is really poignant because so often your voice is not heard and people's voices aren't heard with long COVID. So thank you for doing this.
Thank you. And to our listeners, if you're struggling, please know that there is help out there. Don't be afraid to reach out to a mental health professional or someone supportive. You are not broken, and you don't have to go through this alone. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Voices of Long COVID. I hope you found it informative. Please make sure to leave us a review. You can follow Voices of Long COVID on Instagram, TikTok, X, Blue Sky, and YouTube. You will find new episodes as my energy allows, wherever you listen to podcasts. Until then, stay safe and stay informed.